Hello, amazing people, and welcome back to the Ryan Files. You're about to hear one of the boldest, sharpest voices in the world of biblical prophecy, economics, and preparedness, best-selling author Mark Goodwin. Mark's been called one of the clearest thinkers out there when it comes to connecting the dots between global finance, the prophetic timeline, and what's coming next. His books, over 40 titles and counting, have challenged and awakened readers all over the world. And now he's back on the Ryan Files, and this time to break down his brand new series, Kingdom Come, and to walk us through the storm we're all watching unfold. Now, I've got to tell you something about Mark. If you know his work, you know he's not big on showing his face online. He stays behind the curtain. So you will not be seeing him today, which of course means you're going to be seeing a lot of me and probably Finn too. You certainly know how she feels about camera time. In this episode, we're going to cover some serious ground, like why the global economic system is on the edge of controlled demolition, why Mark believes pharmakeia and the medical system play a huge role in the deception of the last days, and how to be prepared, spiritually, financially, and practically, for what's coming next. Mark pulls no punches in this one, and if you're listening close, you'll hear what most platforms won't even let people say aloud. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this week on the Ryan Files. We're bringing him back, ladies and gentlemen. Author Mark Goodwin. He has a series out, started already, called Kingdom Come. First book is Behold a White Horse, and I got a chance to read it. And Mark, it's good to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Well, Ryan, thanks so much for having me back. I'm really honored to be with you again.
You know, it's funny. Last time we talked, we were at the end of this conversation, me, thinking like, oh, hey, I got a good idea here. I said, man, Mark, what about this idea I've had in my head about, aliens coming down, being part of the end times? And you were like, you gave me the grace to listen to me. And then at the end of it, you said, yeah, it'll be out in March.
Yeah, I think it was on pre-order at the time.
Yeah. So, and I say it all the time, I'm as dumb as I look. And then when I say that, my wife always says, you're not that dumb. So anyways.
Yeah, it's just great minds think alike, right?
Well, I'll tell you what. So, okay, you
or it's just obvious that's actually the way the powers that be are going to, pull it off and get the buy-in. And, the Bible says, in the last days, God will send them a great deception. So,
yeah.
So, we're being set up for it, I believe.
It's man, you start getting into it again and again and again. You see it from just different angles and aspects too, where this is all coming together. Almost to the extent, I got to be honest with you, and we'll talk about your book here in a second, but man, I'm almost like, how strong of a deception can it be when it's like so right here, right now? I've went down that thought road. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other part of that delusion. It's the Bible says and for this cause God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So, the elect are not going to be deceived by this.
Interesting thing. And, it's such a minute line of thinking when it comes to this alien thing, interdimensional or extraterrestrial. And that's kind of the crux of it, in my opinion. I think we're talking about interdimensional beings, which opens up a whole can of worms versus, hey, they came from Alpha Centauri and the Pleiades,
Sure.
So very interesting. But let's get into your book, man, real quick. I don't want to talk about it a ton because I don't want to be a spoiler. I will say this to everyone. If you like Mark's kind of works, and by the way, I'm rabbit trailing here, Mark, but thank you so much for coming on last time. It was right before Christmas. I got 6 of your books, or 7 of your books, actually, The Days of Noah, Days of Elijah, for my father. And he loves them. He's not a super fast reader, but he's been reading them. I think he's starting book 1, Book of Elijah now. And he loves them, man. It just, and it's so good to see him, being a little bit older and whatnot, but still staying in the moment and reading things and whatnot. Um, I've had a number of people come on who follow the Ryan Files, and they said, "Hey, man, I've read these books, or got them for my nephew for Christmas or whatnot. They love them." So, testament to you, man. Thank you so much for doing what you do. But now I get my guilty pleasure of being able to read the story I want to read, and we're getting into it with, like I said, "Behold a White Horse," book one of the Kingdom Come series. And you can read on Amazon what the premise is. There's a colonel in the Air Force who gets grounded because of his eyesight. Next thing you know, he's working for Arrow, and the next thing you know, there's a figure that gets shot, a political figure that gets shot, and next thing you know, aliens show up, and things start really cooking. So
Right.
we're right into it, book one.
Sure.
Um, and it's kind of what we talked about before.
Right.
You've kind of set it up, right?
Uh-huh. And last time we spoke, that was kind of the big news was was Arrow and the the drones and all of that. And the second part of that is the mark of the beast. In order to have that, you have to have a cashless system. So if you're going to have a cashless system, anytime if you're going to build a building, especially in the place where a building already exists, the first thing you have to do is demolish the existing building. And so I think we're seeing that right now, the demolition, the controlled demolition of the existing economic order. This was something that was predicted by very accurately predicted by the World Economic Forum. They put out a video. It was put out way prior to COVID, but they started the big push on pushing it on video platforms and Facebook and things like that right around COVID.
Right, right, right.
And they had these predictions about the world in 2030. One of the predictions that they made was that the United States would no longer be this sort of single hegemony of the world, but rather we would become a multipolar world. And we just had Marco Rubio on the Megyn Kelly show using that exact terminology, saying this is a multipolar world now.
Wow.
So they really just nailed that, and a big part of that is because we're getting this shift away from the dollar. The America's hegemony has been based around the dollar being the reserve currency of the globe, and now that we've got BRICS, kind of, we and there's been moves that have kind of quickened that. It was something that there was an economist in the '60s, Robert Triffin, and he came up with a concept called Triffin's dilemma, which is if you have the reserve currency, by definition, you have to run a trade deficit in order to supply the rest of the world with enough of your currency for them to interact between each other with and to hold as reserves. And so the upside of that is you get a lot of cheap goods because you just print money, and the Chinese have to manufacture iPhones, and the Germans have to manufacture BMWs, and so on and so forth. But then you get into the problem of you deindustrialize yourself, and then there's this temptation to abuse that status, to be able to just print anytime you get into trouble.
Right.
You just print more money, and then people stop wanting your currency. They start looking for neutral reserve assets like gold, which today is at $3,300, up from um, under $2,000 18 months ago, you know. Um, and so that's kind of your dilemma. And then you lose your the reserve status and you've got no industrial base.
Yeah.
So that's where we're stuck right now, you know. And and so I understand what Trump's trying to do with the tariffs. Um,
Is it a day late too short, a day, day late dollar short kind of a situation? I mean, because
yeah, so
this has been ongoing, and I love that you're bringing your knowledge to this because if I'm not mistaken, you have a background in economics and all that accounting and everything, right?
yeah,
So yeah, you
accounting. Economics was kind of my hobby, and accounting was is what my degrees in. But
that's fun. That sounds funny to me. I
but so
Economics is my hobby.
And you know
Uh,
what? I think if the tariffs were really reciprocal, I think that would have been fair. Um, we kind of don't know what we're going to get from one day to the next right now.
right.
And I think that and I understand that's just Trump's style, and he just likes to bully people and to try to push them into a corner and make them submit. But this isn't a jujitsu mat, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and so he's been forced to walk a lot of that stuff back because um, the stock market revolted, the bond market revolted. We almost got in some really serious trouble with a really bad bond auction, and so now he's had to walk a lot of that back, and now we've kind of come out of this looking a little bit silly. And Bassett seems to get the underlying problem, but he's not the guy that's ultimately in charge. And Bassett, he understands the death of a currency, the failure of a currency. He kind of made his billions, working for George Soros and betting against the pound, and when the pound really had a massive devaluation in the 90s. So he's seen this movie before, and he understands all the inner workings of it. So to hear him coming out and saying things like, uh Bitcoin is a solid store of value, and talking about neutral reserve assets and things, that to me that speaks volumes. The things he's not saying a lot of anything that's gonna um, incite panic, of course, or cause a rush out of the dollar, but he said enough to let us know that him and his team are really, they understand what's happening, and whether or not they can stop it is yet to be seen. We do need to, they are right. We have a little time on the clock left. We do need to bring back some manufacturing. The last thing we want is to be a country with no factories, no and no reserve currency. Um, you think about other countries where that's occurred, you get political instability, social disorder, rolling brownouts, supply chain issues, availability at the grocery stores become erratic. And I'm not sure how well Americans would be able to handle that. But that's
Well, we
that's what
saw it.
a
We
that's
kind of
what a
saw it.
developing country, and a developing country, you have 30-40% inflation a year. It's not necessarily hyperinflation. And by developing country, I'm talking about countries that are trying to develop a manufacturing base so they can be part of the global economy. And I think that's describes America.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that crazy how we got to
Hmm.
this point? And I
Yeah.
think I think you've seen just how well Americans adapt to some of this stuff. We had kind of a whatever test run a little bit. And I don't even think it was that major of a deal, honestly, looking back. But how Americans, obviously buy stock and toilet paper because that's the most important thing. But yeah, you see how we reacted to that. we've been a country that's been blessed, it feels like, for so many years, decades, centuries, that um, we're not, I think the majority of people in this country just aren't really even able to wrap their head around where we're at right now.
No,
What's
no.
what the real game is, because listen,
And the
if
trajectory, Ryan,
yeah,
they're not, that's what they're not prepared for is, you know, you describe upward mobility. When you think about social upward mobility, it's, okay, I'm going to work hard at my job. I'm going to get a raise. I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to buy a bigger house. I'm going to go on vacations more frequently. I'm going to wear nicer clothes, drive a faster car. My kids are going to go to a better school. All of that, that's upward mobility. What we're seeing is downward mobility.
yeah,
Since COVID, maybe you work in the same job, maybe you've had a raise or two, but your insurance doubled,
yeah,
your grocery prices doubled,
yeah,
everything you spend your money on doubled.
yeah,
So that's downward mobility. So if that just happened for COVID, now we're getting ready to go into another economic crisis. And as much as they want to defend the dollar and as much as they want to bring back manufacturing and everything, at the end of the day, we know what they're going to do because it's the thing they always do, and that's print more money. And yes, Trump's done a few things different this time, but he's the same Trump that we had when COVID came around and we started in with the COVID money printing. Yes, Joe Biden exacerbated that, but Trump got the ball rolling on that. And if you don't believe it, he's pushing for $1 trillion military budget now. So everything that was all the money that was saved and scraped and everything by Doge has been blown out the window, taking the military budget from 700 billion to a flat trillion. I think Doge savings right now is right around 200 billion. So they just increased the defense budget by 300 billion. So that's all been negated and then some.
yeah,
So that's what they always do is print more money. And so if they print more money again, you know, what are you going to do when everything doubles again?
yep,
And then what are you going to do when everything doubles again? Because these crises are getting more frequent and they're getting worse with each one.
yeah, yeah,
And each time the money printing gets bigger, and each time the dollars that you're trying to save are worth less, and they'll continue to be worth less until they're worthless.
yeah, yeah. Worthless, worthless. Yeah, and all that we really need right now, Mark, seriously, is just maybe a natural disaster like earthquake or hurricane or famine or pestilence or whatever. And for those of people out there who think we're in the fig tree generation and all that stuff, it's coming. I mean, it's already here actually, and in many ways, and the amount of earthquakes and all that stuff that is just, if you look at the chart, it's just continually rising. So yeah, you just need a few more stressors like that are prophesized to happen, and things get ugly real quick, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course the Apostle Paul, he thought he was in the end times. He kind of assumed that
Yeah,
people were going to get that he was going to get raptured,
yeah,
like okay, the dead will rise first, and then we who are alive, and he counts himself among those people that are still alive, will be caught up in the air with Jesus, which is where we get that caught up. That's in the Greek it's harpazo, and that's where we get the rapture concept from there. For people that say that rapture is not in the Bible, if the Septuagint says, I think it says rapture, but the traditional Greek says harpazo. Um, but even if we're not in the end times, which looking around, it really looks like we are. But even if we're not, America's in its end times, where we say, God might not come for the church, but he might come for you. You might have your own personal rapture. That's why you always want to be ready and make sure you've got your heart right with Jesus, is because, every time you get in a car, you could have a wreck. Every time you go to sleep, something could happen and you don't wake up. So
Yeah.
you could have your own personal rapture, you
Right.
know. Um, but we may not, if we're not in the end times, America is still kind of
We're in a tight spot.
we've crossed the Rubicon, and Doge and none of those things are going to fix it, because we are the problem is so deep seated, and it's so old, and the fix is something that nobody is talking about. We can trace our economic missteps back to 1913, with the founding of the Fed and the IRS, and two decades later with FDR's socialist reforms, which Trump said he didn't want to be the next Hoover, which of course Hoover and the Great Depression is what opened the doors for FDR and all the socialism that was ushered in by that crisis. They never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
But I think we could have survived all of that if we had remained a Christian nation.
Yeah.
But in Isaiah chapter 1, God rebukes Israel for turning their back on him. And he calls them out for their corrupt leaders and their corrupt judges. And
Hmm.
he says, "Thy silver is become dross, and thy wine mixed with water." So in the summer of 1963, the corrupt judges of the Supreme Court decided Shemp versus Abington School District, where prayer and the Bible were taken out of the public school and replaced with atheism, which
Yeah.
was promoted via evolutionary theory. 18 months later, the silver was removed from U.S. coins and replaced with copper and nickel, metals that a silversmith will tell you are dross. So 18 months later, our silver literally became dross
How about that?
after that decision. And then by the end of that decade, the sexual revolution was in full swing.
Yeah.
10 years later, the sexual revolution, desire gives birth to, when desire is conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it's full grown, brings forth death. So 10 years later, of 10 years of a sexual revolution, then you've got a bunch of unwanted pregnancies.
Hmm.
So Roe v. Wade, 1973, the same corrupt judges. That was recently overturned, but according to the Guttmacher Institute, 2023 saw more abortions than the year prior, when Roe v. Wade was still in effect in 2022.
Right. And just so people get clarity on this, Roe v. Wade, it's not like, I mean, the recent turnaround on that was just kicking it back to the states. And each state makes their own. It shouldn't be the federal government's policy or place to decide this. It's each state's, which is a constitutional thing. Should have never happened in the first place. But that's part of the reason why, and there's a lot of states like, I live in Missouri. I can't believe some of the stuff that's passed in Missouri, with regards to this, but it's just, it's not like, it's gone because it got overturned. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's the same thing, only different,
Right.
but it just rallied more money and activism to find ways to make sure the states now make sure it's legal. And that's,
Yeah.
boy, I tell you what, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
Trump's not. He said in the debates that he wasn't interested in a personhood amendment that would grant a person citizenship at conception.
Right.
Which is what we need.
Yeah, that's the stopgap. That's the fix to the problem. This overturning of abortion. I see a lot of Christians, churches, and whatnot. Like, yeah, and I get it. I get it. I guess it's a small victory, but it's not really. I mean,
Right.
I think the enemy will give you those victories.
Sure,
as
sure.
you
Yeah,
step
because
back.
they're secondary and tertiary problems. Just like I said, the sexual revolution. That wasn't the problem. That was the secondary outcome of deciding to not teach our children from the Bible and not allow our children to pray in the classroom,
Yeah,
and to replace that with atheism. So that was the core problem. Secondary effect is a secondary sexual revolution. Tertiary effect, unwanted pregnancies and abortion. Now we're so far down the ladder,
yeah,
62 years later, since God's been evicted from the classroom, that now we don't know the difference between boys and girls.
yeah,
So we're so far away from talking about, hey, should we bring prayer back in the classroom? Should we start having, should we bring the Bible back as a textbook, like it was at the beginning when we were the greatest nation? That's not part of the um, conversation, the national conversation at all.
no. And here's the real crux of the problem. I don't mean to be like a doomsday uh talker. Listen, God's in
Well, I
control of
am,
all
and
this.
I mean, that's kind of like what I do.
I get it.
I've got a homestead. I'm like raising my own food. I've got solar panels,
I got
water,
it. I get, and I think that's
all of
great. I
that.
think that's great. But I also think that that God has the ability to step in and change all this, but it depends on the people and
He
the prayer
does,
and
yeah.
all that. But the other thing that it is, listen, I mean, I hate to be pessimistic, but the truth of the matter is that I think like the next, 4 years, election cycles, you could have real Christian every seat in the House, every seat in the Senate, executive branch, everything. You could have Christians um, that would not do the things that need to be done to overturn stuff because, and I believe this, there is so much money, influence, stuff going on behind the scenes that and it's just that it's like I'll just take a little step and take another little step. Sooner or later, we've got you, and then we control you. And that's the thing. Like if we had a Senate, a House that was really looking to the future, and not politics, looking to the future of this country, I mean, we could get some of this stuff fixed, but we won't. I don't see it ever happening. I think we're beyond that. I think there's just too much buildup, and I think that obviously the reality of having all Christians in politics is, that's not reality at all. So, I just think that we've gotten to a point where, um, yes, you should pray and whatnot, but I think it might be time to step back and be realistic about it and pull up the bootstraps and understand that hey, things are different.
Yeah, buckle up.
Yeah,
It's going to be a rough ride. And to the other point, if these are the end times, Second Thessalonians says, the day of Christ is at hand, but let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So the apostasy, the great apostasy, is part of that. And so if we're in that time, then it's not a revival that we're expecting.
yeah,
It's 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 a church that embraces gender fluidity and boys and girls sports and
yeah.
all of that kind of thing.
And you're seeing it.
Yeah.
You're seeing it. Let me ask you a question. Something maybe you can expand on this since economics is my hobby. I love it. That's awesome. That's a quote. I'm going to get a shirt made that says that. Just wear it around. People will respect me. Um, uh, so you talk about the BRICS countries, and I know that there's a lot of people watching this that don't know and understand what that is, how that has how that can impact America, how that can impact them. Um, so explain all of that versus the American financial system, the dollar, and then the BRICS countries, different currency, all this. Explain that to people so that they can kind of wrap their head around it, just a 101 level, if you don't mind.
All right, so the BRICS is it's an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, um, China, and South Africa. They've recently taken in several new um, members, such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and some other folks. But it's 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 essentially a trade bloc that have felt that they've been um, abused, that America's abused the dollar, the reserve currency, and so they're looking for ways to start putting distance between themselves, between themselves and the dollar. And so what they've done is they've started doing a lot of trade between one another, settling in their own currencies, and they're trying to develop uh, uh, a trade currency. So it wouldn't really necessarily be like a reserve currency, something that they would hold on their balance sheets, but it would be something that would allow them to make trades in an asset that would represent their countries. And so what they've come up with so far is called the unit, and that's their proposal, their current proposal that they're working on. And I think the latest iteration of that is that it would be 40% backed by gold. So and then I think the other assets in there would be kind of a basket of the member countries, and then the golds kind of gives them strength. But I think that's been a huge part of the run up in gold. So all of the BRICS countries have been buying gold kind of hand over fist lately, and so that's going to reduce the demand for dollars, which the amount of dollars was doubled during COVID. So that's why we've seen the price of everything go up, and I think that's also a big driver for the gold price going up as well, just because it's taken a while for it to kind of work through the system, all
Right.
those new dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and it's also, I mean, let's face it, and it's like the most passive aggressive um, attack on America, America, the dollar.
Uh-huh.
The BRICS, uh, the just the idea of it takes power away from what most people out there believe is, America's strongest country in the world, greatest country ever, all that. But it is
Mhm.
really looking at, in a way to circumvent so much of the things that America used to, be in control of, have control over, right?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating, man. And
But the more we see that, the more we'll see that downward mobility that I was talking about earlier, as opposed to upward mobility.
yeah,
Of where your your lifestyle just keeps getting cut in half, cut in half, cut in half.
right.
And so people have to start thinking about that now. Yeah, the same way that Besant and Lutnick and all of these guys are thinking about how can we bring manufacturing back here.
Yeah, but there's a
I'm gonna get off on another rabbit trail. Lutnick, he's another interesting guy. He was the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, which was on 105th floor of the World Trade Center. And so just like Larry Silverstein, he was the owner of World Trade 7, Building 7. His wife made him a appointment for 9/11. So Lutnick, fortunately, the good dad that he is, took his child to the first day of kindergarten on 9/11. So he wasn't in the building either,
yeah,
which it would have been very unfortunate. had he perished, because he's the guy that mortgage-backed securities were already a thing, but he's the one that figured out a way to wrap them inside collateralized debt obligations, slice those up into tranches where the higher rated vehicles paid a smaller rate of return, and the higher risk vehicles paid a larger rate of return, but it was all kind of like mixed up in the soup, so you couldn't really see what was in it. And then they were selling it to all the foreign currencies and everything. And then he's also the guy that pitched uh, to Goldman Sachs to get AIG to start doing the credit default swaps, so that you could sell somebody this stuff that was AAA rated, and then you as the investment firm could take out an insurance policy against that investment vehicle blowing up. And since they knew that it was junk, they were taking out these credit default swaps left and right. And so he's the one. If you could pin the 2008 debacle on one person, if there was one person that you could say, this is the guy we need to put in the electric chair for that, it's Lutnick.
Wow.
Yeah. So we got some real winners in there between George Soros's right hand guy, and the guy that uh, dodged dodged the 9/11 bullet and brought us the.
Hey, he's taking his kid to kindergarten. Come on, come on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because he's got to be a nice guy, because
Yeah.
it had to be a nice guy to give us collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps, and almost implode the entire financial system, right?
Yep. Yep. And meanwhile, just bathing in billions. Um, I
Billions.
I find
Goldman
it
had to Goldman had to pay five. They were found guilty as a firm civilly. Nobody ever went to jail, of course, but civilly they had to pay a $5 billion fine, which I'm sure was probably just less than the tax you pay at the grocery store.
yeah, yeah. Where's that money go to? Where's that fine go to?
Who knows? They probably invest it with Goldman.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
But very interesting to hear these guys embracing Bitcoin.
Yes. How about that? You hear even Donald Trump talking about that.
Sure.
Which
Well,
is
we now have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's official. So it's an official asset of the United States government. And I think we'll see a lot more countries kind of falling in behind, and if they start using that because right now the neutral reserve asset is gold, but very difficult to ship 20 tons of gold from India to China, or from Russia to United Arab Emirates. But very easy, very cheap, and very fast to send $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I think a transaction right now, on-chain transaction right now, is around $30. So if you send $100, it costs $30. If you send $1 billion, it costs $30, and it settles in 10 minutes. On the next block that's mined.
wow. Let me ask you this. All right. All of this combined. And I'm getting to a point. Number one, is there any gold in Fort Knox?
Who knows? Probably. I mean,
All right.
maybe. Who
What is
knows?
we see
It would be such the least of the evils if they've squandered the gold, or
yeah,
leased it out, or whatever. There's a good chance it's been leased out.
yeah,
I think that back when Germany wanted to repatriate, it took them several years to repatriate something that could have been probably flown on 4 or 5 C-130s. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Okay, so given all that, most of these currencies, even the BRICS countries unit, all this
Hmm.
stuff. There's a backing of gold. Of course, we got into trouble going to for the dollar became the petrodollar, and that for those that don't know, it's very interesting how we get here today. But
Uh-huh.
anyways, this is all backed on gold, and the BRICS countries is one thing, but you start throwing in other players like UAE, you start throwing in Saudi Arabia. You're starting to see like a an us versus them kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Just saying. But Bitcoin, all these digital currencies, these cryptocurrencies, um,
Uh-huh.
what are they backed on, and why do they have value?
So, um, all money is just it's just kind of what we agree is money.
Yeah,
So before and people are always going to they're always going to go towards hard money. So Grisham, he was another economist back way back when, and his law. So he came up with a theory or a law, and Grisham's law is that people will spend the soft money and or spend the bad money and keep the good money. And so you think about if you had a if you were going out if you're going on vacation and maybe you're going to spend $3,000 and you had a 1 ounce gold coin or you had $3,000 in paper currency, you know, and they're both worth exactly the same, which one of them you're going to spend?
right,
You're going to spend the paper and you're going to keep the gold, right? So you're going to hold on to the hard money and you're going to spend the bad money.
right,
So um, when the settlers first came to America, the Indians were exchanging, beads and things made out of shells and things. So when when settlers came in with like semi-industrial equipment and they could kind of manufacture those shells really quickly, they inflated the market, they inflated the money supply, and the shells kind of very quickly became worthless. Bitcoin has a fixed amount of 21 million Bitcoin. So that's the most that could ever possibly be mined. And people say, oh, well, it could be changed. But yeah, but once you change it, that's what's called a hard fork. And you still have the original Bitcoin that there's only 21 million and all those other miners and everybody else on the at least 51% would have to decide, okay, yes, we're going to do a hard fork and we're going to make something else. So then it's no longer Bitcoin. So when they say there could be more than 21 million Bitcoin, that's not correct because it's a fixed supply, and there's a fixed amount of gold that comes out of the that's in the earth. And let's see, I think it's is it 3,000 tons a year? I'm going to look it up real quick.
yeah. Well, Bitcoin would be insane to increase the number of Bitcoin.
3,300 metric tons of gold comes out of the Earth's crust each year. So it's a relatively fixed amount. So the you've got more people and the economies are growing, more people and so there's a greater need. So that's why you're getting more and more gold, but the price is also still going up. But
Right,
it's going up at a fixed rate.
right,
Whereas the US dollar, you don't need a truck to mine it or an excavator or it doesn't have to be a SAID or anything like that. You just need the Fed to push some more zeros on their computer, and voila, there's more dollars.
right,
So because Bitcoin is fixed, if it gets wide scale adoption by countries like what we're seeing right now, and there's only 21 million, then the value could just the dollar to I mean it's one Bitcoin's always going to be worth one Bitcoin, but the price of everything else priced in Bitcoin is going to drop drastically.
Right. Right. And it
And so
would make
that's where it gets its value. And because it's a very, very simple protocol, and what sets it apart from all of the other cryptocurrencies is that, you know, uh, it's decentralized. It's ran on various nodes that anybody can buy, and so you can go buy a Raspberry Pi, load the Bitcoin protocol on there, and run it from your house, and now you're part of the you're part of the network.
right.
And so you're helping to verify each transaction.
Right.
And so it's just a ledger. And so that's what money is a ledger. That's really what it is when you have a dollar, that's somebody gives you a dollar. That's basically, they're kind of saying, I owe you a dollar's worth of goods and services. And so if you have $10, it's just a ledger. It's just a way of keeping track of, of the economy. The economy, everybody's goods and services at large owes you $10 worth of goods and services. That's what a ledger is. There's markings on cave walls where they would show, and it was just a ledger to keep track of who owed who what. And you think about your bank, there's really no paper currency in there. It's just a ledger, and what do you use to keep track of that? A ledger, your checkbook, and that shows how many of those units you have in your bank, and how many you used, and how many came in, and how many went out for the specific days during the month.
Right.
And then you balance that ledger.
Right.
So that's what Bitcoin is. It's a ledger.
And it's fine as
and
long as everybody
and it's
agrees that, hey, this has value. That goes with anything in terms of any kind of currency, right? I mean,
Yeah, and so that's what it is. It's mass adoption, but we're moving in the direction of mass adoption. So if we see if we see more countries take it on as a reserve currency, then we could see what would be called like a sovereign FOMO, fear of missing out. And so, if America decides we're going to print money to buy Bitcoin, and the Chinese decide they're going to print money to buy Bitcoin, and the Russians decide they're going to print money to buy Bitcoin, uh, and the OPEC decides they're going to sell oil in Bitcoin. I think we're kind of a long way away from that, but I mean, it could be in the next, 5 to 10 years.
right.
And so I think it makes sense to have a non-zero allocation of Bitcoin.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. Wow. Let me ask
But
you a
we've
couple.
got we've got we've got we've got Besant calling it digital gold.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, moving 20 tons of gold is very problematic and very expensive, and requires a lot of logistics, and moving $20 billion worth of Bitcoin costs $35,
Right. Yep.
and it's settled in 10 minutes.
Yep.
So
How's that if does it at all? The denarius, the Iraqi dinar, if you will.
uh,
Does that come into play in any of this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I
It-
think it's kind of like Dogecoin. It's a meme fiat currency is what I see the denarius as. Yeah,
is
I
it
don't think it's.
whenever I forget what it's called whenever they reissue the
At
currency.
some point they said it was going to be gold backed, but that makes no sense. If you get paper, it's just you've just introduced an intermediary, between you and your gold,
Right.
that makes no sense. Just buy gold.
Right.
If you don't know where to buy it, atmex.com, I think they're really good. They're really good. And in gold, you don't have to buy a whole ounce. The smaller you get, the higher you're going to pay for the premiums.
Right.
But you can buy a 10th ounce of gold for you could probably get the maple leafs a little the Canadian maple leafs a little cheaper than like a gold eagle 10th ounce. Um, Probably the most affordable fractional gold is like the old pre 1933 um, European stuff. So like the 5th ounce uh, Italian liras or the 20 franc French like the gold roosters or
Right. Right. And you have that, if I'm not
Swiss.
mistaken, you have some of that information on your site, correct? Do you, Mark
I
Goodwin?
maybe maybe I'm sure I've done podcasts on it before. I haven't done, I kind of got overloaded and I used to do a podcast once a week and then I got a farm and a baby
I understand.
and
I got it. Well, let me ask you this then. And we've covered a lot of things, and so what we have been talking about is like even if it gets bad, we still got currency. We still got the ability to buy and sell and trade and all that.
oh no.
What happens, Mark Goodwin? What happens if
Uh,
that's taken away? If if paper money, the U.S. dollar or whatnot, sorry, it's done. Or obviously we can get into the, well, if you don't have the mark, you're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade. Mark of the beast we're talking about there.
yeah.
So you know these are different situations where even if you were to have a stockpile of gold, you're not going to be able to utilize that probably in anything other than a black market. um,
Yeah, but there's always been black markets.
sure, sure. Um, but I think that one of the things that's important for people to realize, and I know that you talk a lot about prepping,
Mhm.
um, it just makes common sense. Even if it's a short term situation where, you know, right now we don't know whether we're going to be zigging or zagging, but it'll probably get figured out in a month.
Mhm.
Um, Man, it just makes so much sense. Look, I know there's people that are not going to ever think long term enough to say, you know what, I've got several years of food or whatever, ready to go, or a place to go, or any of that. I know there's a lot of people out there that just are like, no, that sounds crazy.
Uh-huh.
Um, but man, that short term thing is, I think, is just makes so much sense. And there are things that you can have that are currency, in a black market or an emergency situation, for crying
Mhm.
out loud.
Have, if it's going to be something that's going to represent value to people, in a complete total collapse where there are no grocery stores and there's, some kind of an issue where there's not even power, you know, what are you going to trade food for? You know, not gold. I can't eat it. That's kind of on the other side when you start coming out of the crisis.
Right.
That's gonna hold your value to the other side. But during that crisis, it's gonna be, what will you trade food for? Some other kind of food, probably, or security. It's gonna be a very, very uh, basic economy that's going to be founded on Maslow's hierarchy.
Which
You need
is
food. Well, it's number one, you need water and air, and then next you need food and shelter and security, and then all those other kind of things. Self-actualization and uh, friends and all of that kind of stuff is way down at the bottom.
right, right. And, but certainly, like you said, well, you trade food for fruit, but you might trade food for a water filter. Or,
Yeah.
these are all things that go into the prepping mindset.
Yeah, or if there's a farmer and you're willing to like pull in book two of Kingdom Come, the protagonist, he ends up, he's pulling security, overnight security for a farmer because You know, when you get into those kind of times, theft is rampant.
Yeah. And those are the people
I
that didn't prepare.
Yeah, yeah. I think I might have mentioned on the last show that we did, Cuba and the cameraman, and it shows the social collapse in Cuba after communism. But they kind of went through. They kind of went through all of that, you know, and Venezuela's been through all of that. But and it shows these farmers, and uh, Castro comes in and they're on their farm, and they kind of they're kind of doing okay, but then the cameraman comes back like every 5 years, and you see things just start getting worse and worse for them. And by the end, all of their cattle's been stolen,
Mhm.
all of their crops, people come in the middle of the night and steal their crops, so if you've got you know if you've got a rifle and a cup of coffee and you can sit up all night, you might be able to bring some value to somebody that does produce food. But I mean, the best case scenario, and this isn't where people start. You start with make sure you've got enough food and water to get through a 1 week crisis, and then build on that. Make sure you've got enough food and water and uh, whatever kind of defensive items you might need to get through a 1 month crisis, and then build it out to 3 months. And once you've got that kind of 3 month buffer, then that's kind of when you can start thinking a little more long term. And then while you're building out, going from 3 months to 6 months, that's when you might start thinking about that leap from prepping to homesteading. So that's kind of where all preppers end up, is homesteading, because that's having your own water source, having a defendable property that's outside of major metropolitan areas, um, and then being able to produce your own power with solar or whatever, and then having a couple of years worth of food to get you through that learning curve of having to produce 100% of your own food, because
Right.
that's no easy task at all, and it's a huge learning curve, and it's never going to get cheap. You're never going to be any younger than you are right now, and the dollar's never going to buy you more in terms of supplies and the things that you're going to need to set up a retreat like that, or even just to get started, to get off the X, to go from 0 to 1, to have that 1 month supply or that 3 month supply or whatever. It's the dollar's never going to buy you more than it will today. You're never going to be any younger than you are today. And if you're thinking about setting up a homestead, that's a several year process. That's not something you do overnight. That's not something you say, "Oh wow, it looks like things are getting bad, and we better go get something right now." It's possible we could have some little fluctuation in real estate. I think real estate got a little kind of over its skis in pricing, but we could also see to where it just sits and it's stagnant, and the prices of real estate don't move for 10 years while kind of everything else catches up to it, and then it takes another step forward. So I don't expect real estate prices to go up from here like drastically. They could go down, or they could also just kind of stay the same and be stagnant.
I don't think you could,
So
I can't imagine them going up.
no, because they've just kind of hit kind of peak unaffordability, so there's just people are just kind of up against the wall to where they just don't have the money for
Right.
the taxes, the insurance, and the interest rates, and all of that, and everything you buy for a house, since COVID has doubled.
Yep.
Air conditioners to new windows to paint to curtains to bedspreads.
Man, and I saw that. It's so funny. As an entertainer, when COVID happened, the show that I was in shut down, and I needed to go do something. I would just go out of my mind if I had nothing to do. And I went and got a job at Home Depot. I like to woodwork and I build stuff. I know everybody at Home Depot. So I just stopped and said, "Hey, you guys hiring?" They said, "No." "Why are you asking?" I said, "Well, I'm just looking for something to do so I don't get bored." And they said, "Well, we'll hire you." So I got a job, but it was amazing to see in that short period of time how quickly the price of everything in that store went up and hasn't really come down. I mean, the cost of a 2x4, for crying out loud, it's unbelievable. And it hasn't gone down. Hasn't gone down. I don't expect it to, you know. But a buddy of mine, actually, he's a family member of mine. I had him on. We talked about prepping not long after your last episode, Mark. And one of the things that he said, and I think it's great value for people: practice. Take a weekend, turn the breaker off, and practice. Get yourself a little garden and practice. Because you're right, you need 2 years supply of food to figure out how to get enough food to live on. I mean, there's just some crazy things that it's not as easy as I think people think it would be to survive in case of anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I'll tell you what, you're always just a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate it. Um, Tell people about your where to get your books, all your books. Amazon, is that the best place, or your website? Where do you want people to go?
Yeah, Amazon.com. You just go in and type in Mark Goodwin and in the search bar, and all my books will pop up.
And you're
There's
over 30 books now, easy, right?
oh
You're over.
yeah, it's over 40.
Okay.
I think it might be 40 or 41. And then Audibles, you can go to Audible for the audio editions.
Yep.
And
I uh I tend to do the Audible stuff
yeah,
myself. There are some books I can't get on, so I'll read. But
uh,
I like to be able to listen, and if I'm exercising and listen. I like to be able
right.
to, if I'm working out in the shop, I like to listen. So those are the things I like to do. So I get the Audible books most of the time. Folks like my dad love to sit down and read. But man, either way, they work great. And right now we're in Kingdom Come.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. And then
Mark,
and then Prepper Recon, that's my website is prepperrecon.com.
yep,
I have a free 7-step survival plan there because, people that have never done any prepping before, it's and they've just kind of just now waking up to, maybe they thought about it during COVID and then things got better and Trump got elected and so happy days are here again and now the market's crashing and they're thinking, maybe maybe I need to reconsider that. I've got a free 7-step survival plan. You just click the free PDF banner right there at the top of the website, and you can get that. And happy to send that to you. And it'll help keep you from getting overwhelmed, and it'll get you, like I said, from 0 to 1, and then help you put together a plan to keep moving from there.
yeah, yeah, very good. And I've read that document, and it's yeah. People need just go. He's offering you something for free. Go download it, get into it, just read it. At least get the knowledge in your head. I'll leave you with one final question, Mark, and I'm going to put you on the spot, so you don't have to answer this. Um, five, 5 years from now, 2030, does America look much different? Kind of the same?
Yes. No, I think we'll probably be well in the throes of a sovereign debt crisis by then.
All right. And
Yeah.
and
The
everyday
end of
life.
empire.
Yeah, in everyday
That's
life.
barring that Jesus hasn't come back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that so yeah, I think we've probably taken at least one more step down the ladder on that downward mobility that I was talking about earlier. I think we will have seen everything double again. I think we probably will have seen another crisis that where we've turned on the money printers again.
Hmm.
I think gold may very well have doubled by then. We could be looking at, $6,000, $7,000 gold by then. I think Bitcoin will have a lot more mass adoption. I think that because of the economic crisis, I think that people will be more desperate, and I think we'll start looking more like a third world country where if you're rich, if you have means, then you're probably a target for kidnapping, and people like that have private security with them, and bulletproof cars and things like you see in less developed nations.
And you say that's potentially in 5 years.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good, yeah,
Buckle up, people.
right.
Buckle up. Hey, I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, get his books. Go to Amazon.com. Go to Preparecon.com. The one and only Mark Goodwin. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this eye-opening conversation with Mark Goodwin. Listen, if this episode didn't shake you up, I hope at least it made you think harder about where we are right now and where we're headed next. If what Mark shared today struck a nerve with you, here's how you can help keep this mission moving forward. Smash that like button, share this episode with someone you know is awake or waking up, and hit subscribe, because I promise you, the conversations we've got coming are just as bold, just as unfiltered, and just as real. Big thanks to our supporters and agents of the Ryan Files over on Patreon. You guys make this possible. And one last thing before we go. If you heard what Mark said about economic collapse, food shortages, and the system breaking down, then you know this isn't the time to be passive. It's time to be prepared. And that's why I've partnered with My Patriot Supply, America's largest emergency food provider. It's one of the smartest ways to help yourself and your family be ready in the event of an emergency, while also supporting the Ryan Files along the way. Long shelf life, real food, real peace of mind. If you're serious about not being caught off guard, the link is in the description below. You folks are awesome. Be amazing, be positive, and stay curious out there, my friends. And I'll see you right here next week on the Ryan Files.
Are you not curious?
Preparing to transfer the Ryan Files. Now.
I present to you, with great intrigue and wonder, the Ryan Files.